Today I'm going to show you how to make better guitar, vocal, and drum playthroughs using your iPhone and the best camera app, which just happens to be free. Hooray! It's the Blackmagic camera app. It's amazing, and like I said, it's completely free. I'm Blackmagic, and this channel is usually geared towards modern metal and songwriting and production and mixing tips, but today is more on the filming side of stuff. So I recently made a guitar playthrough where I filmed the whole thing on my iPhone 13 right here, not a Pro, not a Pro Max, and I would say that the result actually turned out pretty good. It doesn't look like a phone, and the reason it doesn't look like a phone is because of the steps I'm going to show you in this whole video. It is only for iPhone, but on Android you usually have the option to choose your shutter speed and all the personal customization. On iPhone they want you to have just the easiest user experience and not have to worry about anything, so it's just you pull your camera out and it films. So the reason that iPhone playthroughs usually look terrible is because of that reason alone. We don't get to make all the customization and all the personal choices, so we don't get proper motion blur. For those of you who don't know what motion blur is, it's basically when you're moving your hand or just moving in general. You see how it's kind of blurry? The thing with iPhone is, like, if you're using a bright light, it automatically cranks the shutter speed, so instead of getting blur, it's very jagged, and it doesn't look right, and it makes it look like an iPhone. By downloading the Blackmagic camera app, we get to input all of our own choices. I'll put a link in the description to download it on your iPhone. Let's just dive right in, and I'll show you exactly how to use the app and what all the features mean. So as soon as we open the app, this is what we're gonna see. It looks like this. As you can see, this is my shooting setup, wires everywhere. If we have our camera like this is the view we get, but if you put it sideways, we get more of real estate. We get more information on the sides of our angle. I have it upside down. But you wanna definitely film sideways to get the most out of your image. Since it's a phone camera, the resolution isn't great and the quality isn't amazing, so we definitely wanna get the most information that we possibly can. So you'll see at the top left, we have our lens, which is our normal lens. Every phone camera has one main lens. It's usually the 1X. You'll see there's the 1X, which is a 26mm, and then there's a 13mm, which is 0.5X, a lot wider. You wanna always, if you can, shoot on the 1X. It's just gonna be the best image quality, and it's gonna be probably the brightest aperture to let in the most light. When we don't have enough light is when we get really noisy footage, and it's just the camera trying to boost up that light. In musical terms, it's basically like adding gain on your preamp. So although it brings your volume up, whether it's your guitar or your vocals, you are also bringing up the noise, like the background room noise or the hum from the guitar. So we want to get the most out of it by just making sure that we have the light coming from actual light sources as opposed to pushing the light on the camera itself. Next, we'll go into our frame rate. 24 frames per second is what we're used to in movies and stuff like that. You'll see a lot of YouTubers use 30 frames per second or 60. So if you're playing fast music, like the kind of stuff that I write on the channel and the kind of stuff that I listen to, you're probably gonna want to go with 30 frames per second just to get the most out of it. You'll see you can go actually all the way up to 60 on here, which is really cool. So next we have our shutter speed. Basically the way that works, we want to make sure that our shutter speed is double the frame rate. So since our frame rate is 24, we want to make sure it's 1/48th. And that's cool, but sometimes you might change frame rates and then you're stuck at a wrong shutter speed. So the quickest way to do that, we're going to go in the bottom right here, the settings. And there's something called shutter angle. So we're going to go right here. You can see shutter measurement. It says speed. That's why it shows 1/48th. If we go to shutter angle and then go back to the camera, we want to make sure that the shutter is at 180, and this way whenever we switch the frame rate, it's going to automatically be the exact shutter speed that it should be to get the proper motion blur. For me, at least, when I'm doing, say, like music videos or promo shots, like I will go to 60 frames per second. If I'm at 60 frames per second and 1/48th shutter, I'm going to get really like blurry and smudgy footage. Having shutter speed at 180 is amazing. There's a couple more things that we're going to want to switch in here. In our codec, we have some options. We have HEVC. Basically, the higher up on this list, the better the quality is, but you'll see right now I have 40 minutes of space. If I go to ProRes, which is a very good quality, I have 2 minutes. I'm going to use either HEVC or H.264. I personally prefer H.264. I've done a lot of experimenting on here. It's really nerdy shit. You're probably not going to be interested in it, but basically when you zoom in, the pixelation on H.265 is like lines, and then the pixelation on H.264 is like squares, more like what you're used to seeing. If you want to shoot in 60 frames per second, you actually have to do H.265 because it only goes up to 30 on H.264. So we got that resolution. I'm going to stick to 4K. Color space, you want to keep it in Rec 709. Anything that's like going out on YouTube or on the web is going to be in Rec 709. I have the 13, not the Pro or the Pro Max. If you have the new 15, the 15 has log. For those of you who don't know what log is, it's basically a way more gray looking image, but you have a lot more stops of light between absolute black and absolute white. I think, let's say for instance, as it is right now, we have 8 stops of light. So it's like black, dark gray, darker, whatever, lighter, lighter, lighter. But shooting in log usually gives you at least 2 more. It may not seem like a big difference, but going from even like 8 stops of light to 10 stops of light is a huge difference, especially on a small camera. Like every little bit helps. That's basically all I'm gonna leave for right now. So now that we have that all situated, the next step is to go and choose our ISO. I have cup stains everywhere because I never film over here. So like I've mentioned earlier, our ISO is basically our brightness. It's like our volume for brightness. Like I said with the preamp example, when we turn our preamp up or our ISO up, we're not only making it louder or brighter, but we're also making it grainier and noisier. The thing with the iPhone is it has a very small sensor. The smaller the sensor, the less light it'll allow in. I would suggest don't go anything over 100 on the ISO. Your best result is going to be the lowest possible, which is 34. I would stick between 34 and 100. So that's cool. Next is our white balance. I usually leave it at 5600 Kelvin just because my lights I set to 5600 Kelvin. You can always go into the white balance there and hit auto, and it'll kind of just give you what it thinks it should be. What I would suggest is have it in auto white balance. As you can see, it's like drastically changing from 52 to 49. Have it there, set it to where your angle is, and then press the lock button right there at the top right. Cool. And then tint is basically a little bit more green or a little bit more magenta. I think minus is going to be more green, and then plus is going to be more magenta or red. And then yeah, you'll see like when you press record, it locks it. Cool. So that's all of our normal camera settings. And then up at the top right here is where we get some of our displays. So this one at the very top here is called zebras. Once it hits 100%, that's as bright as it'll go, and then we lose all detail. So it's just gonna be white. And no matter what we do in post, we won't be able to get any of that detail back, especially on a phone because it's very low resolution and color space. So you want to absolutely make sure that you don't see these lines. At 75%, I'm getting these lines, and that's basically telling me that my image at those parts is over 75% brightness. So luckily I'm not clipping. I'll show you where you want your skin tones to be in a second. There's actually a really cool feature in here called false colors. We'll go over that in a second. So I'll usually leave it at 85, and then if it's bothering you, you can just turn it off. So let me show you the focus setting real quick, which is right here where it says A, and it's basically an autofocus right now, so it'll automatically make all those choices for you. But if we turn it off of auto, the thing with phone footage is that we don't really get a cinematic look because it's usually like 100% sharp almost everywhere. This is a way to get your phone to look a little bit more pleasing. So we can just bring this all the way lower. So the very bottom will be our closest focus that we can go. So you'll see I'll go even closer, but the lens can't focus that close. So it seems like that is the closest that I can get. And then we get some of that background blur, which is really nice. That's like what a lot of people call cinematic. There's a lot of debate about what cinematic is, but that's kind of part of it. So this is what's going to allow you to get some of that more cinematic looking footage from your phone. You want to basically have your phone as close as you can to get more of that background blur. As you'll see if I go further and then I set the focus to there, my screen is a lot more in focus than it was when I was at the ultimate closest. It's kind of just the way that cameras work. There's going to be our focus right there. So this feature right here is called focus peaking, and basically let me turn it on. I've set the color to be red. Let's go to the settings. If we go to monitor, we can choose focus assist, and it's going to give us little lines that tell us what's in focus. So as you can see right here, I'm getting these red lines all over the camera just to show that that is what's in focus right now. And then that's all blurry, so we're not getting those lines, but if I click on it, we're getting those lines, and that's just telling me that's in focus, and now we're not getting it here because it's out of focus. So it depends on which focus mode you want to use. If you're going to be using autofocus, then just go back into here and press auto, and then you don't need to have the red lines showing anymore. I use autofocus for the channel here on this camera when I'm filming myself. Any other time I'm using manual focus. I just prefer to have the choice. So now we have some grid lines just to show us where we are. You don't need to use them. I actually never use them, but just for like a point of reference in the cinema world, there's like the rule of thirds. So basically you want the points of most interest to be in these corners in the middle there. It's where your eye naturally goes. I leave this one off as well. I honestly don't know why I would ever use that. So I briefly mentioned it earlier. This feature is called false colors. Basically, as you can see at this meter on the left here, it's telling us what our exposure levels are at. And it's a great way to know perfect exposure and to make sure that the subject or whatever you're trying to get in perfect exposure is in perfect exposure. So you can see if we're ever at red, let's just really push the ISO. That's clipping. That's all information that we're losing and we'll never be able to get it back. You have to pick your battles. So if you want to make sure that the person is perfectly exposed, sometimes you're just going to lose the sky. Sometimes you're going to lose other parts of the image. Just make sure that what you want to be the center of attention, I guess, in the green section. That's 18% middle gray. That's usually where we want our skin tones to be. Some cameras prefer for you to basically overexpose by a little bit. That way when you bring it down in post and make it darker, you get less of the noise and the shadows and it's just a cleaner image. With this phone camera, I do like to expose it a little bit brighter, but just not clip anything, because once you clip something, it's completely gone. I basically try to go between the green, gray, and pink right there. On the bottom left here, we have another exposure tool, which is called a histogram. The information on the left is basically all shadows and darks, and then the information on the right is all highlights. So as you can see, it's such a dark image right now that it's all towards the left. And that's information that we've lost in the shadows. Let's push the ISO way up. Now you can see there's a lot more information everywhere. We haven't like lost everything. So that's another way to judge your scene and to see what's exposed and what's basically being either lost in the highlights or being lost in the shadows. At the very bottom here with this blue section highlighted is where we input our LUT, which is a lookup table, which is basically a filter. On here, we can have the option of just looking at it to see what it will look like later, or we can bake that look into it. So we just turn on display LUT. I have inputted a bunch of LUTs. I will go, let's say black and white, because it'll be very obvious. So you can see right now I have the black and white filter on. Turn it off, it's off. I would need to make sure that I have record LUT to clip to make sure that the black and white bakes into the footage. Otherwise, if I don't click that, when I go to watch it later, it's gonna look like this. Here we have our focus, which I've showed you earlier. Here's the exposure, showed you earlier. This option right here is our stabilizer. You can see it kind of looks like the camera being stabilized. Usually when I'm using my iPhone, I have it on a tripod or something where it's stationary. So you can see now when I move the camera, it's moving. It's definitely moving and it's not stabilized. If I go to standard, it zooms in a little bit, so we're losing a little bit of resolution, and that's exactly why I don't have stabilization on, especially when I'm just keeping my phone on a tripod or something like that. I don't want it to crop in at all because it's already not an amazing camera, so any information that I lose sucks, to be honest. I'll turn it off. You can see every movement. And then let me put on a different version. It's way smoother. I'm screen recording right now, so I'm getting this weird error here. So this feature right here is our zoom amount. I would highly suggest not using it at all. These are our zoom options, but it's not the lens actually zooming, it's just like a digital zoom. So since you can just do it in post and have more options, I would rather just leave it at 1x and not mess with it at all and then make those choices later. Because if I zoom in at 2, I'm stuck with that footage and it's digitally zoomed, so I'm gonna see the grain even bigger and it's gonna be gross. Not grain, noise. So at the bottom here is all the information about the clip. I never actually fill this out. I send my footage to myself and then I label everything like angle 1, angle 2, whatever. I have the whole video right here about how my whole process goes. And that's basically it. So once you've filmed something, you have all of your footage here in your media. And for instance, if you're trying to send it to yourself, I'll either Dropbox it by going up here, this button here, and then it brings you to your different ways of sending it. Usually either email or Dropbox it to myself. You can also use the Blackmagic cloud. I've tried to use it, I just don't understand it. There's not enough information on it either. So I would just email or Dropbox it to yourself. If we want to input our LUTs of some sort, I've emailed myself one. You go on my phone, Blackmagic, LUT, and then you input it into there. And then again, if you want the image burned into your footage, you want to make sure that you have display LUT and record to clip. Otherwise, it's just going to record it as normal. So one thing to keep in mind when you're making a video with your phone, since the image sensor is so small, we don't get the same kind of depth of field that we'll get with something like my Lumix S5 2X, which is a full frame camera. We get a lot more depth of field, which is basically, I'm in focus right now, but you can see the background and everything in the background is a lot less in focus. If I was shooting this on my camera right now, we would all, myself and all the information behind me would all be in the same focus plane, just because the sensor is so small that it doesn't create that kind of depth. So one thing to keep in mind is right now I can get away with having my background lit because of the depth of field, but if I wasn't doing that, then I would have to have it completely dark, and you'll see this in this example right here. I recorded a couple of examples earlier. So this is the image once I've had my video light. I'm using my video light right here. If I turn it off, this is the look that I've curated today. I have my main key light right here. It's at about 45 degrees from here, and it's on the opposite side of the camera. Basically, if your light source is on the opposite side of your camera, you get more dimension and you get more of the shadow information because you're shooting from the shadow side. You can see all of this side is a lot darker than this side. It's just a lot more interesting, and I can prove that because this is what it looks like with my house lights on. It looks terrible, right? If I was to film a guitar playthrough like this, it wouldn't look nearly as interesting. This is why, to me, lighting is way more important than your camera. This is a really expensive camera and a really expensive lens, but it looks like shit. And that's because the light source just looks bad. I have my overhead lighting, my face isn't properly lit. I'm actually shooting right now on the side that's getting more light than this side for a flatter image. You want to avoid that. Turn this off. And instantly we have a lot more cinematic or interesting lighting. So going back to this example, this is what my scene would look like. And you can see what I mean. Right now, this is all out of focus, but on a phone, it's way more in focus than it normally would be. So I'm in focus here, but my background's also a lot more in focus than you would want to be. Because of that, that's why I go to this look, which to me is a lot more interesting. It has the exact same key light, this one right here, and I'm shooting again from the shadow side, as you can see, because my hand right here is darker. You can see the shadow there. It just makes it a lot more interesting. So if I were you and you want to step up your video game for your music stuff or just in general, if you have an iPhone, just use the Blackmagic camera app and then get some sort of video light. If you need a hand at all deciding what kind of equipment to get, leave me a comment down below. I love talking about video equipment and video techniques more than music nowadays. So if you need any help at all, let me know your budget, let me know what you're interested in, what your needs are, if you need autofocus or if you just need a better quality video. Let me know down below and I'll point you in the right direction, because I study this shit every day. I wake up and watch videos of videos. This is more of like a flat look, this angle right here. Getting different angles like this and getting closer to the camera. You can see this is out of focus here, and then whatever this area is in focus. By using the manual focus on the Blackmagic app and choosing your sections, you'll get a little bit more of that depth of field, and that tricks the audience into thinking that you're actually shooting on a real camera instead of on a phone. The selfie camera on the front is basically the exact same focal length as the actual main camera, the 26mm. By using my selfie cam just to like stage the whole scene and then flip it around to actually film it. This is the front camera, the best version of the camera, and then this is the selfie cam. So you'll see it's basically the exact same focal length and framing. That's the best way to go about it. If you're using a different camera with different lenses, then you'll have to figure something else out. But when I'm doing actual playthroughs with my camera, I'm changing my lens almost every scene because I want my wide stuff to be on like say like a 24 or 35, and then I want the compression of an 85 for close-ups and my macro lens, which is a 90mm, just to get it to pop in a different way. The lens makes a huge difference. Speaking of lenses, if you're interested, there's Moment makes a bunch of lenses. There's a company called Moment that makes like iPhone or phone lenses. They've got a lot of really cool options. So now that you have everything filmed, you're going to want to download the also free DaVinci Resolve. Blackmagic is they're a wonderful company. They have their phone app that's free, that's amazing, and then they have DaVinci Resolve. There's a free version. Basically, if you're filming on your phone, it's going to be everything that you possibly need. I have my whole color grading and editing workflow in 2 different videos that you can check out right here. It's a little bit different for a phone, but it's pretty much the exact same, and a little bit different for the free version of Resolve. The only thing that I use in this video that you can watch is the grain is literally the only thing that the free version of Resolve doesn't come with, and you can find like a free grain and just overlay it if you want to add that. Since it's such a clinical and like over sharpened image, adding some grain will add a little bit of realness and like film look to it. I would highly suggest it. Thanks so much for watching this. If you have any further questions, please let me know down below. Like I said, I love talking about this stuff. I do film and photo stuff for a living nowadays, so I obviously enjoy it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.